PFT Live is off until July 25, but it's very easy to fire up the laptop and turn on a light and speak into a microphone about anything that's happening in the NFL. And the thing is, even when we get into this gap between the end of the offseason programs and the start of training camp, plenty of things about which to banter. I don't have a co-pilot with me, so I'll do my best to spit out whatever needs to be said about anything currently happening in the NFL. And we are, again, in the slowest point of the year. This week, next week, it doesn't get much lower than that, but there's still some major things happening in the NFL. I want to start with a big event that will happen on Wednesday. U.S. House Committee on Oversight and Reform having a public hearing on the Washington Commanders situation, from the misconduct that allegedly happened, as investigated for 10 months by Beth Wilkinson, the NFL's handling of the information, including my belief that all of it was hidden in order to protect Daniel Snyder now and other owners in the future from ever being in a situation like this, where a disgruntled employee makes a complaint and the next thing you know, there's a full-blown audit of the business. The next thing you know, they find something that forces the owner to sell. So they've tried to keep all of that buried underground since July 1 of last year. That's what they're looking into. The commissioner has agreed to testify. Daniel Snyder said no. On Friday, the chairperson of the Oversight Committee urged him to reconsider. To a little surprise, he once again has said no. The committee spokesperson says that Snyder is afraid to testify and that he has something to hide. Well, yes, he does have something to hide. This is very simple. If the facts ever came out, if the recommendation that Beth Wilkinson was never asked to give was ever given, it would be untenable for Snyder to continue as the owner. The parallel to the John Gruden situation is obvious. Once the Gruden emails became public, he couldn't continue as coach of the Raiders. There's a chance that Mark Davis, the owner of the team, after receiving the information from the league regarding emails that had been sent, horribly inappropriate emails, by Gruden before he was coach of the Raiders, Davis would have said, really has nothing to do with the job that he's doing now. It's something that happened years ago. It's something that predated his employment with the team. There's no evidence he's done anything here that would require any action, so I'm just not doing anything about it. And we never would have known about it. Once it was leaked, it became untenable for Gruden to continue. So once we know, presumably, the things that Beth Wilkinson found, the recommendations she would have made if she had been asked to make recommendations, Snyder would have to sell. Plain and simple. So Snyder choosing the path of lesser consequence. From a PR standpoint, from a legal standpoint, from a practical business standpoint, it's better for him to not testify than to show up and say things. Either tell the truth and end up being forced to sell the team, or maybe not tell the truth and end up having a different kind of problem. A federal investigation regarding whether and to what extent he lied to Congress. Nothing good comes from that. I'm not saying he would definitely lie. I'm saying his two choices would be potentially tell the truth and suffer the consequences that may include having to sell the team, or not tell the truth and worry about the potential consequences if Congress believes it has been lied to. So it's better to say nothing. It doesn't surprise me. I'm more surprised that the commissioner is going to participate. And maybe he thinks he can work some sort of magic on the members of the committee, the ones who are going to be inclined to question him aggressively. Maybe he'll be able to pull it off, but he won't be able to get away with his standard press conference approach of offering up a word salad, a non-responsive answer to a question that he doesn't want to give a clear answer to. He will be pushed, I presume, on many things regarding the Washington Commanders situation, on how the emails from that investigation got weaponized against John Gruden. He's going to have to be ready to answer that. He's going to have to be ready to answer all sorts of things. My guess is he has spent plenty of time preparing and will spend plenty more time preparing to testify on Wednesday, in the hopes of it going better than maybe it could if they do manage to get him to answer some of the tough questions. But the biggest area of inquiry, I think, needs to be, and we already know the answer, but he needs to be pressed on this. The ridiculous notion that because some current or former employees of the Washington Commanders requested anonymity as part of Beth Wilkinson's investigation, that means that all facts secured from any witnesses, whether they wanted to be anonymous or not, had to be hidden forever. That just makes no sense. it doesn't logically follow. And there are other examples out there of situations where people who wanted to remain anonymous in an investigation just had their name changed. That's all you have to do. And there have been some statements from the lawyers who represent these persons who worked for the Washington Commanders that they didn't want all of this to be quiet and silent. They just wanted their names to be left out of it. So I expect Roger Goodell to be questioned aggressively on that, on the Gruden emails, and on anything else that may come up. But it's going to be a compelling day, and we'll break it all down here and at PFT once it does happen, assuming that Goodell does indeed testify. For now, we assume he will. There's no reason to think he won't. But once he does, it will be time to not just get your popcorn ready and see Goodell get grilled by Congress for the first time since 2009, but digesting the aftermath. What did he say, and what does it all really mean, and where does it go from here? Those are questions that we continue to ask as it relates to the Deshaun Watson situation. That continues to be really topic number one as far as the National Football League is currently concerned. When will the league act? What will the league do? And I continue to believe that paid leave is creeping back onto the radar screen, even though the commissioner took it off the table in March. The story from Mark Maskey from Friday suggests that the league is preparing to impose a significant suspension. We had reported on Thursday that the NFL Players Association expects it to be unprecedented, and 1 year as a proposed suspension would indeed be unprecedented. There hasn't been a player who otherwise is able to play. Mike Vick ended up missing 2 years because he was in prison. Watson available to play, not prosecuted, not charged, but potentially suspended for a year by the NFL. Yes, unprecedented. And the NFLPA, as we reported and as Maskey confirmed, intends to defend Watson by pointing to owners, 3 of them specifically, Snyder, Patriots owner Robert Kraft, and Cowboys owner Jerry Jones, as individuals who potentially were involved in violations of the conduct policy and did not face significant consequences at all. Because the conduct policy says owners and members of team management are held to a higher standard, the argument will be that whatever you do to Watson has to be in proportion to these other individuals, to what punishment they received. And you potentially start down the path of having mini trials within the broader question of what to do with Deshaun Watson, because you need to find out, what did you know about Snyder? What did you know about Kraft? What did you know about the Jones situation, specifically coming from the voyeurism scandal from 2015 that was never investigated by the league? There's no evidence that the Cowboys even told the league about it. It was all handled very quietly and it went away. What you did or didn't do to those 3 becomes relevant to what you do or don't do to Deshaun Watson. And what it also does, and my guess is the phone lines were buzzing to 345 Park Avenue after these stories came out last week, specifically from Washington, Boston, and Dallas. Hey, I don't want this Watson thing to morph into a big, ugly mess for me. So handle it. And there continues to be a possibility of a settlement of the Watson situation where the league and the union and Watson would come together and reach the terms of an agreed suspension. The problem continues to be this, though. As long as Watson insists he did nothing wrong, how do you ever settle this? At some point, he has to acknowledge responsibility if he is going to accept a punishment. I don't think it's enough to say, I'm just accepting 8 games to get this over with. I still insist I did nothing wrong. Maybe they find a way to thread that needle because he has pending litigation, because it's not like he can come out and say he did something that violated anyone's rights. Maybe he can agree that his practice, which seems pretty well documented at this point, of having a wide array of private massage therapists and potentially trying to make those massage sessions become sexual encounters, that in and of itself violates terms of the personal conduct policy. And that's what he's being punished for, not violating anyone's rights. So it's not an easy situation for anyone. The league has been investigating. Maskey's story answers some questions, but raises some questions about how thorough and complete the investigation really is and has been. 11 of the 24 plaintiffs have been interviewed. Why not all 24? Have they said no? Have they decided they don't need to talk to them? How many documents have been reviewed? Maskey says relevant documents have been reviewed by Lisa Friel, who's in charge of these investigations. There are plenty of documents that would fall under the heading of relevant documents, pages and pages of deposition transcripts that have been generated and are still being generated in these cases. There are lawsuits that are still being filed. See, that's why I keep coming back to the idea that he should be put on paid leave. And I know that Browns fans will be up in arms about that, because what it does, it takes him off the field for this year. And then next year, presumably, if this is all over by then, is when he would serve an unpaid suspension. So you could lose him for 17 games this year and 8 or 9 games next year, or 12 games next year, or all of next year. Who knows? The Browns fans and the Browns organization just wants this to be over, and they want to move on with Deshaun Watson as their franchise quarterback. And I get it. I understand it. I've said this from the get-go. He needs to settle these cases. He needs to resolve these cases. He needs to have his reckoning, and he needs to move on. And he definitely needed to do it when he was traded to the Browns, because Browns fans should not be put in this position where they allow their fandom to cloud their judgment as to what they should or shouldn't be saying and doing to defend Deshaun Watson. And I understand it's very difficult to do. If you're a passionate fan, you do everything you can to defend any of your players who are perceived to be under attack. You shouldn't have to do that. That's my point. I don't take any issue with the Browns fans who get up in arms because we've written another story about, oh, here's another story. Well, I understand that you're upset, but you're upset because your favorite team has put you in this position where you become part of the crowd, part of the mob that is blindly defending Deshaun Watson, regardless of whether or not he did something for which he deserves some sort of punishment. Finally, remember this. And I thought this was a significant statement from Kim Ogg, the Harris County District Attorney, who recently had a podcast interview with Mike Meltzer. Exoneration did not come from the finding by the grand juries to not indict Deshaun Watson. She said that herself. That is contrary to Rusty Hardin's attempt to bootstrap the lack of an indictment into no punishment whatsoever. Hey, all the grand jury had to do was find probable cause. They didn't find probable cause. That means he's free and clear and didn't do anything wrong. No. And the DA said it herself. It does not mean exoneration. There are other forms of justice that can be done here. Civil, through the lawsuits, and as she said, administrative, basically what the NFL does. Justice comes in many shapes and sizes. And I continue to believe that the Harris County Prosecutor's Office was influenced by the fact that there will be other ways for Watson to be held accountable for what he did or didn't do. And that trying to prosecute him with that very high bar of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, that was something that they were not interested in doing because they feared they would lose. No prosecutor wants to take on a case that the prosecutor fears they will lose. You would rather devote your resources to crimes that you think you can make stick against a given defendant. It sends a bad message to the public when the prosecutor starts swinging and missing on these efforts to put people that the prosecutor believes committed a crime behind bars or on probation or whatever the final consequence would be. So, bottom line, civil justice system continues with 24 cases, soon to be 26. Eventually, it maybe be more. And the NFL continues its investigation. And at some point, they say they want to get this done by training camp. And by done, that means propose a suspension, have Judge Sue L. Robinson, an independent voice, do her hearing, have Roger Goodell in a position to handle any appeal. There's no way this is all getting done by training camp, especially if the NFLPA is going to exercise its right to defend Deshaun Watson by saying your punishment that you're proposing is not proportionate to the punishments that were imposed on Snyder, Kraft, and Jones. It's going to take time. And the biggest factor that continues to hover over all of this, there will be more developments. There will be more lawsuits. You know, if there's a belief when the NFL does whatever it's going to do with Deshaun Watson that it wasn't sufficient, that may draw more people out. They may decide to sue. Or if they see that Watson was suspended for a year, they may say, well, maybe this really is something that I should pursue. So until we get to the middle of March of next year, assuming that the filing of the first lawsuit got Deshaun Watson to stop whatever it was that he was doing that gave rise to these lawsuits, that's when the statute of limitations will expire, middle of March of next year. Until we get to there could be more, up to 66, according to the reporting from Jenny Vrentas of the New York Times. So not an easy situation for the league. And there are voices in the league office that are advocating very strongly in favor of Watson not playing until these cases are resolved. And their position, as we reported last week, has gotten stronger in light of recent developments. All of it began with the HBO Real Sports feature 3 weeks and 6 days ago, the filing of 2 more lawsuits, the Times report, some of the things that Rusty Hardin said, and it just feels like it's a snowball that has gotten larger and larger over the past few weeks, and who knows how much larger it will continue to become. Baker Mayfield, will he be traded before the start of training camp? That's an issue that continues to percolate, and it will be something that I'm sure we talk about here and at PFT until it's done. I've seen some reporting that the Browns are now willing to pay half of the $18.8 million guaranteed salary due to Baker Mayfield in 2022, back around the draft when the Panthers and the Browns tried to work something out and it fell apart. Reportedly, the Panthers wanted the Browns to pay 13 or 14 million, which means 5 million, 4 million or thereabouts is what the Panthers would have paid. So it's a 50-50 split now. What would that be? 18.8, 9.4 million. Is that right? 9.4 million. My math sucks, but I think that's close. That's close enough. 9.4 each. Does it get it done? Who knows? And it's not just because people will think, well, the deadline is the start of training camp. Look, Baker Mayfield needs to know where he's going to be living, where he's going to be working, what he's going to be doing. There isn't much he can do now to agitate, and he's kept his mouth shut pretty much since that long podcast he did. But he needs to know. And it can't just be day one of training camp. Oh, no, don't come to Ohio. You're going to North Carolina, or you're going to Texas, or you're going wherever. He needs to know where he's going to be. And my guess is behind the scenes, they are working diligently to get this done. And the question is, when will they get it done? And the Browns don't need any further distractions than the ones they have from Deshaun Watson. They need to make this go away and move on from Baker Mayfield sooner rather than later. One last thing before I get to the Twitter mailbag for today. The comments from Bart Scott about Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. I love something like that in the middle of June because it gives us something to write and something to discuss. But there's one huge flaw in Scott's analysis that defenses were happier to face Tom Brady than Peyton Manning. Scott last played in 2012. At some point after 2012, Tom Brady became an even better quarterback, an even more dangerous quarterback. Year after year, game after game, drive after drive, that computer in his brain sees more things. You get to a point, and Brady told me after, I think it was me, I don't know, he did an interview with us after Super Bowl 51, the 28-3 turnaround, where I think that pushed him into the upper echelon of all-American sports stars and made him a guy you had to go see while he was still playing. Little did we know at the time that he'd still be playing now. But the idea that you can't show him anything, you can't do anything pre-snap that he hasn't seen before. He's still got the physical skills to get rid of the football accurately and with sufficient velocity and force. And he's got the brain power to see whatever is coming and to know before the ball's even snapped who's going to be open, and he knows how to get rid of it before the walls close in. That's what makes him as dangerous as Peyton Manning ever was. So I think that the Tom Brady post-2012 is a lot closer to the best of Peyton Manning. Bart Scott wasn't around for that. But with the 3 Super Bowls that were won, and MDS made this point a few years ago, Tom Brady could have 2 busts in the Hall of Fame. You could argue he eventually could have 3, depending upon what he does going forward. But pre-2009, post-2009. The 3 Super Bowl championships in 4 years to start his career, and then the 3 additional Super Bowl championships later in his career. 4. You could have the young Tom and the old Tom, like the young Elvis and the old Elvis in the Hall of Fame if you wanted to. And Bart Scott was only around for the young Tom, not the old Tom, who arguably is even better than the young Tom ever was. All right, let's see what we got here before we wrap it up. I'm just going to scroll through here. Tom Marshall, our good friend who goes by ARedZona UK on Twitter. Did the Deshaun Watson contract set an unattainable bar for some of the quarterbacks looking to get paid? Well, that's a great question. We don't know how unattainable it is, because what will happen, and we've already heard it from some of the other owners, starting with Ravens owner Steve Bisciotti, that the $230 million fully guaranteed 5-year contract given to Deshaun Watson creates a problem. It complicates their efforts to negotiate with their quarterbacks. Now, they didn't come out and say that's an aberration that we refuse to acknowledge. You'll hear that from time to time. Sims and I were talking about that last week. You'll hear other teams or other businesses, depending upon what the market is and how one contract sets a new bar. Well, they're crazy. We're just going to ignore that. That's an aberration. Well, you haven't heard that yet, because those owners know there's a chance they're going to have to go along, that's where the ball has moved. And here's something that I think I've meant to say a few times about the Watson contract, but I'm not sure I ever articulated it. As a practical matter, these contracts that are given to franchise quarterbacks, guys who have truly shown that they are among the best in the NFL, they are really guaranteed as a practical matter. When do we ever see a team get into the out years of a quarterback's contract and want to tear it up and get rid of him? That never happens. Now, injury could do it. And with a guy like Lamar Jackson, that could be an issue. Or maybe Deshaun Watson's legal issues could cause the Browns to decide to look elsewhere instead of paying him $46 million a year a few years from now. But for the most part, and I think this chain is largely, if not completely unbroken, true franchise quarterback, that money in year 3, 4, 5, 6, which is not guaranteed, it really is guaranteed. The only difference is you got to put a big pile of money in escrow if you are the owner of the team that does the $230 million fully guaranteed contract. And I checked with someone who knows how the funding rule works. And I think by next March, Jimmy Haslam is going to have to put like $170 million away for future payment. It's a stupid, outdated rule that has its roots in the fact that once upon a time, owners didn't have the money potentially to take care of their players. So money had to be put in escrow. Now, nobody's going bankrupt. Nobody's going to be without the money necessary to pay these salaries when they're due. But that's one of the reasons why teams don't want to do it. But as a practical matter, franchise quarterback contracts, with very, very few exceptions, are guaranteed, because you never see the team tear it up and get out from under a true franchise quarterback's contract. So will other teams have to do it? Will Kyler Murray get a fully guaranteed contract from the Cardinals? Will Lamar Jackson get a fully guaranteed contract from the Ravens? That's going to be the question going forward. Can the teams push back against what the Browns did? And, frankly, the fact that the 3 months since this Watson contract was done has entailed some disintegration of Watson's case, at least in the court of public opinion. I don't know. Does that make it easier for the teams to say, well, we can't do this open-ended commitment? We don't know what the future is going to hold with anyone. It's a delicate argument to make, though, because Watson's the only one who's in this specific situation. So it is attainable. And I think we're going to learn more as some of these other contracts are done. How much will be fully guaranteed, and will there be other Deshaun Watson deals? Will it be an aberration, or does it become the start of a new trend? But I think eventually, especially for franchise quarterbacks, it is going to be a trend. It may take a few years, but there's going to be somebody who has the leverage to make it happen. And I still wait for the day that a quarterback does a contract that guarantees him a specific set percentage of the salary cap to protect against the possibility or the inevitability that his contract becomes obsolete as the cap goes up and up and up. That's the one final frontier. Fully guaranteed contract was a frontier that we weren't sure was ever going to happen for 5 years for that kind of money. The next piece for a franchise quarterback who has real leverage and real options and can really squeeze multiple teams together. Let's say another Kirk Cousins who gets to the open market can say, I want a specific percentage of the cap. Maybe Russell Wilson is going to do that. I guarantee you that Russell Wilson's next contract will be fully guaranteed. I forgot about him. With Murray and Jackson, who knows? But everything the Broncos have given up and this hype machine they've created, justifiably so for Russell Wilson, his next contract, I believe, will be fully guaranteed, because he's got that Tom Hagen of agents who has one client in the NFL. He can drive a hard bargain, and the Broncos are already in position to give Russell Wilson pretty much whatever he wants. Paul Dobson, have you invested in a passport yet? We need to get you over to London this autumn for one of the NFL games. Don't forget to bring Sims. He can grab a burger off the floor of Heathrow or Gatwick airports if he wishes. The problem is we have to work on Sundays during the NFL season, if you didn't already know, and NBC doesn't do any of the London games at night because at night here is the middle of the night, literally in London. So I doubt that we're going to make it during football season. But one of these days, if I live long enough, we'll be there in the off season to get to know some of the very passionate fans of the NFL and of PFT Live and of PFT who are in the UK and in Ireland. Next one comes from Real Aaron Ellis. I'm curious about expansion to Canada. Talk of London, Germany, Mexico. Toronto could easily sustain a team, even though the Bills series was a bust in the early 2000s. That wasn't our team, and the venue wasn't ideal. I don't know that the NFL would put a team in Toronto because of the proximity to Buffalo. And there are other cities where the NFL, I think, would put teams before it would encroach on the turf of the Buffalo Bills. I think London is very viable. I think eventually, if there's ever one team in London, there will be two teams in London, maybe an existing team plus an expansion team. They've got two stadiums in London that are ready to go, Wembley and Tottenham Hotspur, ready to go for NFL teams. And it makes sense to have two instead of one. It reduces travel costs because those two teams are going to play each other twice per year because presumably they'd be in the same division. Now, it increases travel costs for other teams that have to come over on a regular basis, and it would create scheduling complications and exchange rates and salary cap and all sorts of things. But at some point, I think it's going to happen that there will be NFL teams in London. And I say teams, two teams, not one. Two teams in London and more teams eventually elsewhere. I don't know when that's going to start. I think the NFL is going to want to get to 18 regular season games before we start hearing about other teams. But I really do believe at some point 32 is going to become 34, and that's going to become 36, and that's going to become 38, and eventually there will be 40. It's going to take a long time, but I think it will happen. And the other thing to keep in mind, I had a conversation with somebody in a position of influence about this not that long ago. You don't really need to have a team in a major metropolitan area. You don't need to have a 75,000 seat stadium. I've had people explain to me that the extra money that is made from the fans who attend a game and sit in the upper deck, it's arguably not worth the extra expense of maintaining the crew necessary to accommodate all those people, that maybe a 40,000 seat stadium is enough. And that opens up markets that you wouldn't think of as being potential NFL markets. And also, remember, it's about getting these games on TV. That's the future. Get them on TV, put people in a position where they can wager on these games, both big picture and one play at a time. That's the one technological quirk that we're waiting for, where everything that's happening at the stadium is being beamed real time into your house or onto your phone, and you can bet one play at a time. That will create a greater appetite for more inventory. So you can only have 18 games, presumably. I don't know. Maybe once they get to 18, they're going to push for 19 or 20. But another way to increase inventory is to increase teams, and I think it's coming. And I think London's in play. Who knows about Germany? Who knows about Mexico? I don't think Toronto would get a team, but I do think at some point there will be more NFL teams, and my aspiration is to be living and working long enough to see that day come to pass. Rich Chesney has a question about Deshaun Watson. The contract is structured in a way to financially absorb the suspension the first year. Is the shift in rhetoric from his legal team intentional and an attempt to ensure that the suspension occurs in 2022 and not 2023? And what Rich is getting at there is the structure of the first year of the contract, where $45 million or so was paid as a signing bonus. The salary is very low. It's the minimum. $1.075 million, I think, is the minimum for a player with his level of experience. That's not uncommon, first of all. I know people think that it was nefarious and it was intended to minimize the financial impact. That's not uncommon. And it's also happened with restructurings for people who know they're being suspended. Tom Brady once did a restructuring with the Patriots in advance of his 4-game suspension in 2016 in order to reduce the financial impact week in and week out of his suspension. And the league didn't say boo about it. So that precedent's already out there. The league doesn't think there's anything untoward about doing it. Now, in this case, what you could do then, if he is suspended without pay in 23, let's assume they put him on paid leave for 2022, gets all the cases resolved, next year is suspended without pay. They could restructure that bonus, put the salary all the way down to the minimum, spread out the balance, and do it again. And it will be perfectly fine. The one way the NFL can handle this, though, is to impose a fine, a major fine that circumvents this effort to artificially reduce what he's going to lose by way of his pay. So there's many different ways to get to the same spot. There's nothing improper about it. And I don't think it matters 2022 or 2023 to Watson or the Browns. They just would like to get this over with. They want to get this over with. They want to have him serve whatever the suspension is and then get back to the business of putting together a football team that can be highly competitive with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, presumably. It's going to be a challenge after missing 1 year. It's going to be a real challenge, as Sims has said, if he misses 2 years. And at some point, he misses so much time that maybe he just doesn't ever get it back. Let's call it there. I think that's good for today. I went longer than I wanted to go. See, I appreciate having 5 weeks off of PFT Live, although I woke up Saturday morning ready to do another show. I can do a show anytime. All we do is talk about football. We BS a little bit at the top and we talk about football. Now, look, I know that there's fewer things to discuss now, but we can find plenty of things to talk about, as we did today and as we will again on Wednesday. No, well, I don't want to say for sure no videos tomorrow. I got my annual physical. Anyone out there that's especially over 40, get a physical every year. I get blood work, I get stress test, I get everything checked out, make sure everything's fine to get me through to the next year, 1 year at a time, make sure everything's good, make sure everything's good. I spend the day before worrying what if everything isn't any good, but we'll find out soon enough. Maybe tomorrow afternoon, depending upon developments, we'll do some more videos, but definitely Wednesday morning, or maybe we'll defer Wednesday until after we hear from Roger Goodell. Maybe that's the way we'll go. Either way, there will be regular video content generated over the course of the next 5 weeks and nonstop written content at profootballtalk.com every day of the year. Hashtag no days off. Thanks as always for some of your time, and we'll see you again here extremely soon.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.